So when it comes to losing fat, the most important thing in your dieting phase is adherence. You want to be able to adhere to your diet in a way that's going to ensure that you're continually making progress. This is important because we want to get to a stage where once we've lost the excess fat that we're trying to lose, we are maintaining our weight. And so what I'm going to talk about in this video today is how you should go about your weight loss journey. Certain strategies and tools so that you can adhere to your diet, not throw in the towel, and actually get to your goal weight. So firstly, this graphic is inspired from Andy Morgan from Ripped Body, who's one of my favorite coaches in the world that I like to follow. And he basically nailed it with this by showing what happens in overly restrictive diets. And this is how numpties diet. I like to call these people numpties, okay, affectionately. So someone is in an overly restrictive diet for a long period of time. Then they get to a point, or probably a short period of time, let's face it. Then they get to a point where they binge. And after the binge, they just think, darn it, I'm not going to continue with this. And so they typically stay in this period for months until they decide again they're going to go through an overly restrictive diet and go through this cycle. This is the cycle that we're trying to break. Now, it's important to show what this actually looks like in terms of weight loss. As you can see, in this period here of the overly restrictive diet, yeah, they're losing weight. They're losing a lot of weight. But that's not the problem, because when they binge, their weight increases. And then when they get to that moment where they just completely forget that they were actually trying to lose weight, the weight steadily increases. And this is a pattern I see over and over again with people who don't understand the complexities of a fat loss journey. So again, credit to Andy Morgan on this one. Here's how I get everyone on high energy physique to diet. Firstly, they're on a sensible diet. They are not on an overly restrictive diet. This means that they know what their macros are. They're eating high protein. Most of the food that they eat is minimally processed whole foods, which is going to help manage hunger, etc. They're getting good sources of fats to ensure that they're not too inflamed, because typically they are. They're drinking enough water, and every now and then they're including some kind of treat, something that most people on overly restrictive diets do not allow themselves to do, to ensure that they are having adherence with their diet and fat loss. Then we implement a diet break or pit stop every 4 to 6 weeks. One of the best things about a diet break and pit stop is, because you are not a competitive physique athlete trying to get on stage, and you have to live life, which means you've probably got holidays, weekends away, etc., we can actually strategically ensure that your diet breaks and pit stops coincide with those periods, so that there is less stress and less feelings of you missing out when you are in your dieting phase. That does not mean the dieting phase stops. And that's typically what happens on a restrictive diet. You think to yourself that you have to abide by the rules, or if you don't abide by the rules, game over and everything needs to cease. But understanding that it's okay to have strategic breaks along the way actually allows you to restart things guilt-free. And actually, these diet breaks and refeeds can also have a physiological impact as well as a psychological impact, which I'll talk about now. So as you can see from my poorly drawn chart, sensible diet, lose weight, little increase, but then we lose weight, little increase, and we just keep on losing weight until we get to our goal weight, okay? Much more longevity, much more adherence, much smarter. So how can we implement these diet breaks and refeeds, and what exactly do they look like? I'm going to talk through 4 quick strategies. Once or twice per week, you can allow yourself to have a free meal. I do not want to call this a cheat meal. I've done a video that talks about language and our relationship with food, whereby we don't want to enforce a relationship with food that's negative, because that feeds into us having certain rules around food. So free meal can basically be whatever you want, but focused on still having high protein, just something that takes the brakes off psychologically. And I must stress at this point, this does not need to be a binge. This is just something that you enjoy eating, that you might not need to track, and that's going to help you feel less like you're on a restrictive diet. Now, something that I encourage, if we're having a free meal, is to have one during the week, because typically people like to be on it during the week, and then the weekends is when they can lose the plot. If we can have a strategic free meal during the week, when it comes to the weekends, we've not been thinking that we're restricting ourselves so much and then we don't end up binging. So that's something that I would consider doing, and maybe just have one during the week, one on the weekends. We're going to bring your calories to maintenance. So a starting point of 16 calories per pound of body weight. Once we've got that number, we're going to ensure that we're going to work up from our deficit to maintenance by incorporating more carbs into our diet. So that's what's going to bridge the gap. Those carbs are likely to contribute to more glycogen, which is stored carbohydrates in the muscles, and that's going to ensure that you can potentially push harder in your sessions. And that's exactly what we want, because we want your training to be fueled as effectively as possible and for you to still get some kind of improvement in ability and ensure that we're not losing muscle mass. You may get to a stage where being in a deficit is exhausting, and so having a high day can actually upregulate your NEAT and upregulate your motivation to simply go for a walk. Because sometimes when you're in the depths, and hopefully you don't get there, but I remember having been there myself, just looking at stairs would make me feel absolutely shattered. We don't want you to get to that stage. And so if we are getting to that stage, that's when a high day is a good strategic implementation, as it's going to take away that mental fatigue and allow you to perform better mentally, but also physically, i.e. you're going to be able to move around more, not feel so sluggish, and feel more mentally on it. And this is 3 to 10 days, and typically not 10 days. I always program in a week, but 3 to 10 days of you still trying to make good choices with food, but not tracking so much, maybe having a few more carbs, etc., maybe having a couple more free meals. This is going to do a few things. It's going to upregulate your hormones. When we are in a calorie deficit, a lot of things in the body are being downregulated. Your hormones are one of those things that get downregulated, and this obviously has a negative impact on how you feel and your performance. So having a 3 to 10 day diet break is going to have a positive impact in terms of reversing any downregulation in hormones, which is going to help you feel and perform better. Also, it's going to have the same effect that a high day does, i.e. you're going to have the motivation to move around more, so your NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, is going to increase, and you're going to have more glycogen in your muscles for a more prolonged period potentially, which means that you're going to be able to train even harder in the gym, which is what we want from you making advancements with your physique. This is something that we try to coincide with holidays, weekends away, etc. And these might be slightly more frequent, because what we're trying to do here is just account for the fact that you have to go to these events, holidays, etc. But we don't want you to be guilty the whole time thinking, oh no, I can't eat that, or I've got to resist this or whatever, because that's just not going to be fun. Especially when we're kind of in this for the long term and we're not trying to jump on stage. So having a pit stop is essentially like a diet break, but it allows for much more flexibility with your lifestyle. Now, with everything that I've mentioned, we don't want to be having high days every day. We don't want to be having pit stops every weekend. We don't want to be having diet breaks too often. Fat loss is a process. Fat loss does require commitment, some form of sacrifice, some form of change. And whilst these are useful tools to use along the way, I don't want you to think, oh, this is fantastic. I don't really have to change my life too much. You most likely do. If you are overweight and you don't move much, and you're making poor choices with food, and you're not particularly healthy as a result, then something does need to change. These strategies that I've talked about are not things that we are to take advantage of to make you feel like you don't need to make much of a change. And so I really want to drill that home. Once you've committed to change, you know that you want to change, you know that you are going to make certain sacrifices in terms of nutrition, you're going to start to move around more, etc. These are things that we can start to add in. But we're not going to add these in if you're not adhering to the changes that you need to make. That's number one. So hopefully you understand more about the dieting process. Hopefully you now understand that it's not just an intense period of restriction and how that actually hampers you. And if you implement these strategies, this is really going to ensure that you do get to your goal weight, at which point you'll be ready to go into a reverse diet. And so I recommend that that's the next video you watch. Thanks for watching. As always, I'll see you in the next video.